And welcome back to another episode of the Total Sports Live podcast. This is Jovan Alford, and I'm joined by my guy Nick Earnshaw. Called him up from the bullpen, from the minor league bullpen. Joined us on the pod. He wasn't with us for our last one, but as we continue our rotation of summer pods, he's back with us this week. We're going to talk about some hoops as the NBA draft just wrapped up on Thursday night. However, before we do that, always make sure you're following us on Twitter at Total Sports Live, checking out the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio. There's probably a million other podcast platforms that I probably didn't name, but pretty much if you have a podcast, if you listen to a podcast, you can find us there. Just search Total Sports Live TSL Podcast. Appreciate everyone that tunes in, listens to the pod as we try to bring you some good quality content this summer, trying to stay in the rotation as we get ready and gear up to football season, because that's when it really is our bread and butter. But like I said, I got my guy Nick with us here on the pod. Nick, always glad to have you on, man. Last week we talked about Eagles OTAs with me and Harrison. This week we're switching sides here and switching sports. We're not talking baseball, we're talking basketball, NBA hoops, Sixers, the draft, everything basketball in this episode.
Yeah, Jovan, it's great to be with you once again back on the Total Sports Live podcast. It's always a fun time talking hoops and football as well. I can't wait to talk football in the future with Harrison and yourself. But yeah, I mean, we have a little bit to talk about tonight with the 76ers. I mean, draft was last night. Very, very interesting draft. A very interesting move the Sixers made as well. It just feels like something's brewing for this NBA offseason. It's just the appetizer right now, and we'll get into the meat of things in the coming weeks. But yeah, excited to talk some hoops. Excited to talk a little NBA draft and some of these prospects. I got a chance to see a few of these prospects up close and personal last season, so definitely excited to talk about them.
Oh yeah, most definitely. You did, as you spent a lot of this past winter and spring in Delaware at the field house, checking out the blue coats and everybody coming through the G League. And there are some G League guys that we will be talking about in this pod. But before we do that, like you said, we got to talk about the hometown 76ers. They entered the draft with number 23, surprisingly, after the Nets deferred it. So then they got all the mock drafts working, saying, all right, who could the Sixers get? But you just knew, like you said, deep down inside that this team just wasn't going to use that first round pick, even though people like myself and others tried to convince ourselves, like, all right, they're going to use this pick, man. They're going to go get they're going to get a young athletic wing. This is perfect. There's so many guys that they can get at 23. You start running through all these different simulations in your mind of who they can get in mock drafts. But as it was behold and what was been reported days leading up to the draft, that they weren't going to use the pick. They did not use the pick, as they traded it and Danny Green to the Memphis Grizzlies for backup combo guard De'Anthony Melton. Melton is a solid player. Averaged, I want to say he averaged 10.8 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 2.7 assists per game on a nice 40% shooting from the field and 47.4% from the field. He's also extension eligible this offseason, but we'll see what the Sixers obviously do with that. But a guy that can play both sides, defender, athletic, can shoot a little bit. Not bad for the Sixers, Nick, especially from what we saw with this team, in that they didn't really have the guard depth as we saw, in the playoffs, because Shake Milton really wasn't the Shake that we knew last year, so it really put a hamper on what this team could do at the point guard spot. There was only so much you can do of rotating Maxey and Harden in and off the floor, interchangeable. Now they get a guy in Melton who, like I said, very solid defender, can give you a little bit, can score, can do a little bit of everything on the floor, which I like. He's only 24, which is even better. And the funny part is there's like two connections between Melton and the Sixers. Daryl Morey obviously drafted De'Anthony Melton, so there's the Morey connection, and also Melton actually worked out for the Sixers during the pre-draft process a few years back. He was actually in the same workout group, because I was there, in the same workout group with Landry Shamet and Shake Milton. So to see it kind of come full circle like this is kind of pretty cool. And yeah, like I said, Sixers get a really good, excellent player at a very relatively cheap price of $8 million per year, almost like what Morey did when he first got here, getting a guy like Steph Curry. So just what are your thoughts about, the team, going out and making that trade, for a guy like De'Anthony Melton, who's, like I said, still only 24 years old, which is amazing.
Yeah, no, Jovan, it always comes full circle, doesn't it? I mean, Morey going back to a player he knows and what he knows best, and Melton drafted him, knows him pretty well. So, I mean, to unload Danny Green now, you get him off the books. You save a couple of $1 million there with his contract going elsewhere to Memphis. Now you move the 23rd pick. I do like this move for the Philadelphia 76ers because, it allows them to get a little younger, a little more versatile with Melton. They need as much they possibly can. He's a little bit of an up than Shake too, because we saw last year Shake kind of took a step back, was hurt for some of the year as well. So, if you are the Philadelphia 76ers, this is a pretty decent move, and I think it's just a little appetizer, you could say, for the Sixers. Just a little move during draft. Now you're going to see, I think, more substantial moves as the offseason progresses. But Melton, he's a little more versatile. He's athletic. He's young. And I think that's the key there. He's only, in his low 20s right now. He's entering his mid 20s. And, I think he gives you something. He can shoot the 3-point ball because, I mean, that's what they need. They need shooters to come off the bench. When he can shoot threes at a decent clip, that's what they have. That's what this team has been lacking. So to get Melton, he's also pretty athletic as well. He can get to the rim when he needs to, and he plays pretty decent defense. And, to have him come off the bench, especially with the upside he brings, I think this is a solid move for Daryl Morey and company.
My mic was muted. So for people that don't know, this is, like you hinted to, this is going to be an interesting off season for the Sixers. Free agency starts, I think, next Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. I think that's when free agency starts. And the Sixers is a team that have been linked to a lot of different rumors. We've heard, the PJ Tucker rumors, about, what the team will offer him a 3-year, $30 million deal, but we've kind of seen like that kind of got like some ice thrown on it earlier today. Tom Moore, who's been covering the Sixers for years, said that the Sixers aren't trading to trim salary to use on a non-taxpayer MLE, which means a potential free agent forward PJ Tucker almost surely won't become a Sixer. So we had those rumors. We even had rumors last night leading up to the draft about Matisse Thybulle, which, I've talked this about with my friends, with you guys. It seems puzzling for the team to trade a guy like Matisse Thybulle's caliber. And like I was telling my one friend, I said there was a lot of teams in NBA that are interested in a guy like Thybulle and believe he could be that missing piece for them. And we saw, last night, being reported by Keith Pompey that the Sixers were trying to acquire Eric Gordon and using Matisse Thybulle as an asset and even attempting to get a third team to participate in the deal. However, we also heard that the Trailblazers were willing to make a deal straight up for Matisse Thybulle. So when we hear all these rumors, like you said, Nick, this could just be a precursor of things to come for this team. But from your opinion and where you see, things, if you were Daryl Morey and the Sixers, what would you do to continue to try to help? I don't want to say rebuild this team, kind of retool this team to get them to where they need to be if they want to compete. I can't even say with Brooklyn because that's a story unto itself. Competing, with the Milwaukee Bucks, competing with the Miami Heat, competing with the Boston Celtics, who are just in the NBA Finals, even the Toronto Raptors, who I think is a very feisty team in the Eastern Conference. That's just a very fundamentally sound basketball team.
Yeah, no, I think it goes back to a little bit towards the Ben Simmons trade. I think it goes back to that. You lose Seth Curry, you lose Andre Drummond, and you know they lost a little bit of depth in making that move, and it kind of showed as the playoffs moved along, and you saw that in the second round. Obviously, James Harden still needs to step up too. I mean, he didn't play as well as we probably would have liked. He probably had one James Harden-esque game that everyone's used to in the playoffs. And you know, I just think they need to put shooters around Joel Embiid and Harden. They have to upgrade that. Way to go about it at this point. You've seen the around swirling around him throughout the past couple of weeks now. So listen, I think Thibault he obviously has to do a better job of on the offensive end. He does not shoot the ball pretty at an efficient clip. He hasn't throughout his short career so far in the NBA yet, but you know he gives that presence on defense that you lost with Ben Simmons. You don't have that. You wouldn't have that perimeter defense. But we talked about this last night. I mean, Thibault, he's an all defensive player at this point in his career. He's that good and that valuable on that end of the floor. And I don't think you should give him up for nothing. If you're going to trade Matisse Thibault, you better be getting something back. And, you know, if you're going to give up defense for offense, you better be getting a player that's going to elevate you substantially. And, you know, I just think if you're giving up Matisse Thybulle, you better get a substantial return back. And you know, I think right now you keep him. You don't just offload him for nothing because he's a very valuable asset to this franchise. Now, you know, they don't have a lot of room to work with this offseason, especially with how they are constrained cap wise. And, you know, with the Tobias Harris contract, it's not going to shock me if they move him, if they find a suitor for him as well throughout the offseason. They might have to unload Tobias Harris to kind of rework this roster a little bit because clearly you have committed to James Harden and Joel Embiid as your future. You're going to go for it right now in this year. And if you have to unload Tobias Harris, that you know who had a pretty good playoff as well, might I add. You know that's not an easy decision to make, but if you don't unload that contract, I mean, what else do you have to work with? I mean, you just have Harden, you have Maxey, and you have Embiid, and that is your core right there. So if you move on from Tobias Harris, and you know you're able to get something back for him, and you're able to have some flexibility in the market, I mean, this is what the Sixers might have to do if they want to contend. And you know, it's unfortunate because I think Tobias Harris would be a solid piece to this puzzle, but they just the contract that he exhibits just does not put them in a position to upgrade the bench and allow them to do things in free agency or make other moves if they don't move on from that contract because they don't have enough money.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right about that. Like you said, it's no disrespect to Tobias the person or Tobias, you know, the player, because Tobias the player has been, like you said, was
Yeah, I like
people
Tobias.
don't right, people don't want to realize it, but like you said, he was the team's like second best player in the playoffs. More so, like you said, offensively, he had a couple of good games, especially in that Miami series in the first two games where there was no Embiid. He was literally putting the team, you know, on his back. And then defensively, what he was able to exhibit in both rounds, you know, that's something that, you know, can't be taken for granted. But like you said, with his contract, I don't think would have been an issue if you didn't have a guy like James Harden taking
Right.
up another huge portion.
47 million.
Right, taking a huge portion of that salary cap up. So, like you said, now it makes Tobias Harris, you know, not makes him the next in line to be, you know, moved. Even though, like you said, you don't want to, and I don't think the Sixers would do this, right? They're not going to give away Tobias Harris for anything, right?
No.
Like I've seen people say, you know, just trade him for a couple of role players, you know, trade him to X, Y, and Z team, and it's just like it's not that simple because like many people have said before and things I've listened to saying if you're going to trade Tobias Harris, you're probably going to have to take on a bad contract to get back. And there's not a lot of players in the NBA that have a bad contract that are decent, good. And they're like bottom of the barrel type of guys here. So when we think about it in that, you know, complex, like you said, he has to be the one sadly to go. And then it's going to be, like you said, what you get back in return. And like you said about Thibault, right? You can't move off from him, like you said, just because of what he brings defensively. Like when they didn't have Ben Simmons last year, he was their best perimeter defender. even though they have De'Anthony Melton, I can still say Matisse Thybulle is their best perimeter defender, and those don't grow on trees like that.
Yeah, and Melton is nowhere near where Thybulle's at. I mean, Thybulle is an all-world defender at this point in his career. He's that good, and when you give up defense, and we saw, I mean, the Boston Celtics, they played pretty good defense. They got to the NBA Finals this year, so clearly that means something. And obviously, the Miami Heat, another good defensive team, getting
Golden
pretty
State.
far into the playoffs. Golden State as well. I mean, obviously they have Curry and Clay and all, but you can't give up a valuable defender for nothing if you're Matisse Thybulle. Now, is there a Bradley Beal maybe available? We saw his cryptic comments come out a couple of days ago. I mean, Kyrie Irving's of the world. What does Daryl Morey have up his sleeve? I don't know if Eric Gordon and PJ Tucker are the answer at this point.
No.
Certainly, PJ Tucker is not worth 3 years and $30 million at his age.
At 37 years old now.
No, he's going to be 40 years old by the time that contract would be in. That rumor swirling around is just bogus. And if the Sixers were to ever do that, I think they're in a lot more trouble than we think. But
they would be funded PJ Tucker sneaker collection at that point.
Oh my goodness, no! If they get him, listen, I won't mind a PJ Tucker signing if they go after him on a mid-level exception, something of that nature, but at an affordable price. You can't just be throwing around $30 million with where they are with their cap space at this point. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think for Tobias Harris, it's going to be tough to move him as well. So the Sixers are kind of stuck. I trust Daryl Morey. He's been able to unload bad contracts before. Al Horford, we saw a few years ago, I mean, being the most notable one, Josh Richardson as well, and they got some pretty good value back. But listen, Tobias Harris is still a quality player in this league. He's a good third or fourth option for the 76ers. Mm-hmm. It's just where their bench is at. They just have no depth. They have no shooting off the bench. They don't have a ton of defense coming off the bench. Does Melton help that? Yes, for sure. And he brings some young experience here for the Philadelphia 76ers. But moving on from Tobias Harris can be very difficult. It might have to be a necessity if they want to put pieces around Harden, Maxey, and Embiid. We'll see what Daryl Morey has up his sleeve. He got a pretty good player last night, unloading Danny Green and that contract. It depends. I wouldn't be shocked if the Sixers go after another star. It would not shock me. But to do that, you're just going to have to move Tobias Harris.
Yeah, you're going to have to move Tobias Harris and probably come off a Thybulle to get, that third star. Something else that caught my attention while you were talking, right? You mentioned, like you said, this team lacks depth. And it's not as people that watch this team, right? And watch what they do in other realms of development, right? It's not that this team doesn't have guys off the bench, right? It's because they don't play the guys that they develop that should be your bench, pieces like a Charles Bassey, like a Paul Reed, Isaiah Joe, who was basically just exiled. I don't understand what happened with that. And even Jayden Springer, but Jayden Springer obviously had to spend time in Delaware because he needed those reps. He wasn't going to get it in the team. But specifically talking about those three guys, Bassey, Paul Reed, Isaiah Joe, those guys also should have been getting considerable minutes this past season to help upgrade your bench to where you're not sitting there thinking, man, I got to retool this whole bench, got to go bargain shopping for guys when it's like, no, you have the guys here. And we saw what Paul Reed was able to do in the playoffs. I think it was a disgrace that Doc Rivers put him in that situation where he had to be forced into action like, hey, we're going to put you in the game. We're going to need you to play well. And it's just like, well, coach, should have been playing me in the rest of the whole season, but that's a whole nother topic, whole nother day. But it goes back to my point is, Nick, they have the young players. Like we've seen them. They have guys on two players on two ways that could help. And this team just they don't do nothing with them.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. I mean, Paul Reed should have been playing by the end of the year. DeAndre Jordan should have never been a Philadelphia 76er in the first place. And Paul Reed
should have kept Willie Cauley-Stein at that point.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, once they lost Drummond, I mean, this team just did not know what to do with the backup center position, which is pretty crazy. No, I thought Paul Reed definitely should have got a lot more minutes before the playoffs instead of just being thrown in there into the fire. But hey, maybe that turns out to be a good thing for Paul Reed. He gets thrown into the fire now, has a little bit of
Good
experience,
point.
knows what it's like to be in high level basketball in the playoffs in
Yes.
the NBA now. So you could turn that negative into a positive at some point
Right.
for Paul Reed. So maybe he takes that, and maybe the Sixers say, hey, I mean, you're going to be our backup center to our franchise cornerstone next year. I mean, I don't know where they're looking. I mean, Charles Bassey, after Paul Reed did his thing in the G League, Bassey comes in and was phenomenal as well. I mean, they've drafted well, and they've developed a lot of good players down in the G League. I mean, Furkan Korkmaz, Shake Milton, a number of guys. You mentioned Isaiah Joe. He just hasn't gotten time, to develop that 3-point shot. He hasn't gotten the minutes. So, no, I think they do have some pieces. It's just about, do they want to wait around for these guys to develop? And that's
Right.
kind of the key. And I think Paul Reed should get some more minutes. Isaiah Joe, do you want to wait for him as long? Korkmaz, I think he could have been a great bench piece, but he took a huge step back
Yes,
after
he
getting
did.
that 2-year
Yes, he
deal.
did.
He could have been a key contributor from the 3-point line. So there's so many questions with some of these players, but yeah, listen, I'm with you. I'm with you on the Paul Reed and Charles Bassey train. We were screaming last year for Doggers to play these guys over DeAndre Jordan because he was so unplayable. I got in a ton of fights about that, but it is what it is. We'll see if Doc will play some of these young guys this year, though.
Yeah, like literally, there literally were, I felt like, no negatives if you played those young guys. Like,
No.
it's trial by fire. Like, if they don't work out, playing out well, they don't pan out well. But you gotta give them a chance over 32-year-old, 33-year-old. I don't know how old he is. Jumping up, trying to catch alley oops geriatrically. DeAndre Jordan not doing anything, and then poor Paul Millsap. I just remember that in regular season game
Man.
against the Heat, where Doc Rivers basically sent him out there like old Yeller to just get abused in the paint, and it's just like at the 5, and it's like
old
Paul
man
Millsap's
yells at
not even a
cloud for Paul
5, he's a
Millsap.
4.
It's like old man yells at cloud Paul Millsap. Like, what can he do at the 5? You can't run a small lineup like that with Paul Millsap. He was just kind of added into the trade, I feel like, for the Sixers in that Ben Simmons deal and James Harden deal. So, I mean, yeah, they have some interesting questions who's going to back up Joel Embiid. I hope it's Paul Reed. I hope it's Charles Bassey because, I mean, they were both tearing up in the G League. They have some time. Just give them a chance to develop. That's all.
Definitely give them some time and develop. This is Total Sports Live podcast. Jovan and Nick breaking down the Sixers, the draft, everything involving the hoops world. So, like we said, the Sixers didn't draft anybody, but they've started to, put some things together. There could be some future coats that we could be looking at from what the moves they've made so far. So far, they have signed to a 2-way deal, Julian Champagne, who averaged almost 20 points per game in the last 2 seasons at St. John's. He was just a straight up bucket getter. If you watch St. John's this past season, the season before, dude's just he's a shot maker. He's a shot maker and gets buckets. If you can do that in the Big East, you're pretty good. So he's on the 2-way. So it'll be interesting to see what the Sixers do at the 2-way because Mouth Powell and Charlie Brown Jr. is on 2-way. So who stays, who gets elevated, that's going to be tough, even though I think both of them should stay, but that's a whole different story for another day. We also have Sixers also signed to an Exhibit 10 deal, Aminu Muhammad, who left Georgetown after his freshman year, and Georgetown wasn't that good under Patrick Ewing this year. He averaged 13.7 points a game, 8.2 rebounds. Young guy, 19 years old, not really. He's a little raw still offensively. That could be a guy who could be a future coach just with Exhibit 10 deals. If, guys, they get a bonus, I think, and if they get waived, they can get assigned. So another future coach that could be on the development wire. And then they also found another G League Ignite player for the second summer in a row, Michael Foster, who was with G League Ignite last year. If you remember, they had Daishen Nix on the summer league squad, and then Daishen Nix obviously ended up in Houston and kind of tore up the Blue Coats in the G League final with RGV. But now they get another guy, Michael Foster, who a lot of people like his skills, and I know that's someone you've seen actually, Nick, down in Delaware. And I think Foster's only like 19-20 years old, so he's still growing and still developing.
He's young. He's younger
they
than
could
me.
have another guy.
Yeah, I mean Foster. I do like the Foster move. Champagny as well. I mean, he played really well at St. John's. Shot around 35% from 3-point land. Could be another shooter you can develop. I mean, that's on 6 attempts a game as well. So listen, I think that Foster could be a pretty good player for the 76ers that they can develop down the G League. That's what you use the Blue Coats for, and you have a great system. It started with Johnson a few years ago as the head coach. Now you have Kobe Carl in there as the head coach. They get back-to-back G League championships. So, I mean, they have a really good program. They develop some really good players down in the G League, and I think Champagny. I think he and get an opportunity to play. And then I do like the signing of Michael Foster. I did get to see him as well. Listen, he has to improve his jumper. He comes out of high school as the 22nd ranked recruit. The year he came out, got an opportunity to play with the Ignite. Just has to be a little more consistent with that jump shot. And then, this is what the G League is all about. It's about improving some of these guys, getting an opportunity to play instead of sitting on an NBA bench and just, waiting for your shot. So I do like some of the moves they made. And listen, the Sixers have utilized the Blue Coats a lot. We like to see them get used in the 76ers uniform at some point with some of these young players. But yeah, I think these are some good young players that the Sixers, could develop into future maybe role players and even starters.
Yeah, most definitely, and probably would not be surprised if all three guys end up in Delaware as that roster continues to take shape. It'll be interesting to see how those three guys also play in the summer. We'll see because they will be part of summer league roster. Summer Sixers coming soon. Back to Utah for the Utah summer league
There it
out
is.
in Vegas. So summer Sixers is coming back. Probably won't see a lot of the main guys there. Obviously, won't probably see Maxey. Maybe we probably.
I
I
think
would hope.
Maxey's graduated from the
Yeah,
summer league.
Maxey's graduated from the summer league. We'll probably get some Charles Bassey. I definitely think we'll probably see some Charles Bassey down there in the summer league, and maybe hopefully Isaiah Joe because I think he needs
Yeah.
it. I just think he just needs just to continue to get those reps. And Jaden Springer, this will be year 2
Yeah,
for
you'll
Jaden.
see Springer. You'll definitely see Springer.
So if we're thinking just those three and the three that they signed got 6 roster starting to come in shape. Obviously, we'll hear more as we get closer to summer league play, which begins shortly. So to wrap up the pod, we got to talk about just the overall NBA draft, which Harrison delightfully laid it out here for us. So we're gonna, stick to what he has, here for us, and talking about just another successful draft class for G League Ignite, something that me, you, and Harrison have been following, for the last couple of years. From an outsider's point of view, and obviously you and Harrison being on the inside, at Delaware, seeing a lot of these guys, come through and just following the league, just reading and seeing these guys and watching games whenever we can. They've been successful. Dyson Daniels drafted last night, 8th overall to the Pelicans. Marjon Beauchamp, who I really wanted the Sixers to draft, but he went to
Yeah, I think we were on the same page with that one. Oh man, if they kept 23, Beauchamp's there, I was hoping they would take him, and he probably would have been there going 24 to the Bucks.
And now he's going to be a Buck, and then I know he's going to be a star.
Pains me.
It's just written. And then Jayden Hardy, who surprisingly dropped to the second round at 37th, which is very interesting. A lot of people didn't think he was going to drop that far. He could have been a late first rounder. Gets 37, but again, overall, Nick, every guy that has, pretty much every guy that has, come out of the Ignite program the last 2 years has been drafted. Obviously, last year, I think the only one that wasn't drafted was Daisha Nix. And this year, Michael Foster was the only one drafted. Isaiah Tide got drafted last year. But G League Ignite so far doing what the job is supposed to do. And I think this is setting the stage for more guys coming up because we see Scoot Henderson coming up next. And a lot of people think Scoot, yes, his name is Scoot. Some people think Scoot could be I'm not going to say number one because a lot of people like the generational talent of Victor Wembanyama out of France, but a lot of people think Scoot could be a top 2, top 3 pick. So G League Ignite right now, putting in the work and producing the talent.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing that the NBA and the G League have created for these young players coming out of high school. going right to a professional league in the G League. I mean, it's the step right below the NBA. You get to play against some pretty solid talent down
I
in the
mean, we
G
saw it
League.
this year with all the
Yeah,
veterans signing into the G League. It was
yeah,
it was
yes,
everybody just coming through. Isaiah
yeah. I
Thomas,
mean,
Lance Stevenson was just
yeah,
flying.
everybody's been down there. It feels like at this point, and so I think it's great experience for these young players coming in, and I think it's going to work. I think it's going to work for a long time. I mean, Jayden Hardy, Beauchamp. I mean, just a number of players coming out of this team, and I really do like. I think it's a great program for the NBA. You're going to get a lot of. I think you're going to see a lot of players start to move this way in the coming years as well. So I do like it. I'm with you on Beauchamp. I wish I wish the Sixers were able to get him and snag him up. He's got great size. He's got great length as well. Has to develop a little bit more of that perimeter shot, but I think he will at some point. And listen, the Bucks, they've developed pretty good players. One being Giannis Antetokounmpo at one point. So I think he'll do well with the Bucks. But yeah, Jayden Hardy, I was a little shocked he went that low. Obviously he didn't shoot the three particularly well last year with the G League Ignite. Wasn't the most efficient scorer as he probably
No.
could have been. As he was, coming out of high school. I mean, he was the Nevada 2021 Player of the Year. So, listen, I think the Mavs got to steal that late in the draft. I think he's
I
going
mean,
to develop.
I think he averaged 21 points a game.
Yeah,
That's nothing to
yeah,
sneeze at. Not in the
yeah.
G
It's
League.
nothing to
That's nothing to
sneeze at.
sneeze at.
No. So I think they, yeah. He could have instead, but it's crazy because he could have chose Kentucky or UCLA. And as a couple of his top options, instead he goes the Ignite. So I just think the Ignite, they're really going to take a lot of these top players in the coming years, and I don't know how some of these schools are going to enjoy that, but listen, it's going to happen, and you're going to see a lot of players because a lot of them they're doing the one and done thing, and they'll move to the Ignite, and they're getting against go some NBA talent. So. I do like it, and I think Jayden Hardy. I think Dallas. I really do think they got a good player in Hardy, and he can develop at his age for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, the Ignite, they're already getting a couple of guys, coming in soon. I think they got a kid out of Canada. I think he's going to be joining, and he's like very highly touted. People a lot talk about him. Then I think they just picked up a 5-star recruit. I think.
I think I did see that. Yeah, I did see
And then
that.
they've got a 5-star. I think. Matas Bullsless. I don't know how to say it. My apologies, kid, for butchering your name.
I'll give it to you.
He's a 5-star recruit, number 11 player in ESPN's top 100 for the class of 2023. Committed to the Ignite. So you're seeing the talent starting to get there. And like we said, we saw a guy like Scoot Henderson who wasn't a part of this year's draft class, but it's going to be doing 2 years in the program. And we're seeing that what 1 year has already done for him, to see him already being slotted in as, this guy's going to be a top 5 pick. So G League Ignite, definitely it's working out that pathway to playing professional basketball, giving the guys another option outside of, like you said, going to college or going overseas to the NBL in Australia, and also Overtime Elite, which is going to have some guys that seem like coming up in the ranks too. So we'll see how these things, start to come together and see the G League Ignite, because we already see the guys having success from this year, from this past year's class in Green and Kuminga. If these guys pan out in Daniels and Beauchamp and Hardy, yeah, it's going to look scary for for college basketball very soon.
Yeah.
If it keeps on progressing the way that they do. And we also got to talk about local talent. There's a lot of local guys. There was a good amount of local guys that didn't hear a name called in the draft, but they did, get picked up very quickly. Like in the NFL, the 8th round, the UFA period is always fast and furious. In the NBA, they do not wait. They are right there, ready to go. And we saw Colin Gillespie, the Villanova standout, getting a 2-way deal from the Denver Nuggets. We also saw Jalen Samuels, who was a duo with him and Colin Gillespie. He's going to the Pacers on Exhibit 10 deal. For some reason, I always thought that Jalen Samuels will thrive in the G League just the way he plays. I think he's going to thrive. I can't wait for him to be a Mad Ant in Fort Wayne. So we have him. We also have Jordan Hall from St. Joe's. He was going to the Spurs on a free agent signing. And we also have a Philly kid, Isaiah Brockington, Finished his collegiate career at Iowa State. Started at St. Bonaventure. Went to Penn State from Archbishop Ryan. He signed an Exhibit 10 deal to the New Orleans Pelicans. So a lot of local talent that's just being reported, just from last night into today, Nick. But I was, outside of the local guys because I'm excited for them. I can't wait to see them in the summer league because I think it's going to be fun. And obviously see them in the G League. I was looking at the guys that have signed to Wave and Exhibit 10s, and I'm just like, yo, the G League this upcoming season could be like really, really good.
Yeah, I mean, it was great last year. I mean, getting to see Miles Powell, getting to see Charlie Brown, I mean, all these guys, and then you have the Ignite come through Delaware as well. I mean, listen, the talent pool it's becoming essentially what minor league baseball to an extent, in a sense, with Major League Baseball. It's becoming kind of the same thing. It's a breeding ground for talent. I mean, you're seeing guys come up all the time. I mean, Alex Caruso's of the world. You're seeing, tons of players.
The Miami Heat, essentially.
Yeah, the Heat. Yeah, I mean, you're seeing a lot of these guys start their careers in the G League and then end up as, great players. I mean, Pascal Siakam, another name, started in the G League. I mean, the Raptors done a great job developing players there too. And so, listen, I think it's going to be great. You're going to see a lot of these also local talent. I'm excited for the Villanova guys. You see Mikal Bridges, Jalen Brunson. They're all having a lot of success in the NBA. So, hey, if they start in the G League and they start developing, I think you'll see a ton of these guys, even as role players in the NBA in just a few short years.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So definitely can't wait to see how a lot of these guys perform in the summer league because that will be their first audition to either keeping their two waves or getting to go to training camp to go to the G League. So it's going to be fun. And obviously, like I said, these probably aren't the only guys. There's going to be more names flying through that come through. Guys that will be playing this summer, and it's going to be fun basketball. So if you enjoy basketball. If you enjoy basketball, there's going to be a ton of NBA. Started next month, it's just going to be a ton of NBA summer league. You won't be able to get enough of it. It's going to be on TV for like half the month. So you need something to watch. There you go. I was going to touch on overall draft off, but I feel like everybody does that. Everybody talks about users and all that stuff.
We were unique. We have our unique way we went about it today, and I think it was a great discussion, Jovan, for sure.
Yeah, most definitely. So I think that's about it. I think we got everything that we needed to wrap up here on the show. Like I said, make sure you follow us on Twitter at Total Sports Live, totalsportslive.com as always. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio. I think that's about it.
Anchor.
Anything? Yeah, Anchor. Yes, definitely. Anchor.fm. You can follow us on there. TSL Podcast, Anchor.fm. You check us out there. You can listen to the podcast there. You can download the episode, subscribe to us on there as well. Appreciate that. I think that's pretty much it. I don't think there's nothing else that we have to wrap up on this segment. I think we're good.
Yeah, I think you covered it all. I mean, that's pretty much it. Check out the site. I know Seth has a new story up there as well.
Yes, Seth,
did Harrison have a new? I think Harrison had a new story up too, right?
Yes, he had Girardi getting fired.
Yeah, the Girardi. Yeah, that was
and then, like you said, Seth with an interesting view of fantasy football and Christian Kirk's deal and how that kind of shook up, fantasy football this year. If you don't know, Seth is like a true fantasy guy. Like
all in. He's all in on fantasy.
He's all in. If you see his Twitter, like the breakdowns and the ADPs and yeah, he's the real deal. He's the real deal when it comes to fantasy. So if you want to check that out, you can check that out on Total Sports Live. So that's pretty much going to wrap up this episode. Once again, appreciate everybody tuning in. Thanks again for listening. I think that's pretty much about it. So for me and Nick, everyone have a good one. We'll talk to you soon, and make sure I just want to leave this quick PSA here. Make sure you go out and vote. I'm not talking vote every 4 years. Vote like your life depended on it. Because if you know what happened today with Roe v. Wade being overturned, and if that doesn't get you angry, upset, or pissed off, you should go do something about it. And it starts, like I said, it doesn't start on the presidential year. It starts on a non-presidential year. It starts, voting for people in your local townships, in your local counties, your state, your cities. It starts from there, and then we get to this point. But if you don't do the job and the groundwork on the ground, if you don't do the work on the ground, then this is the type of shit that happens. So yeah, make sure you do your part as a person. Apply pressure to these people, apply pressure to these politicians. Nobody wants to see people standing outside Capitol, Capitol singing God Bless America. Nobody want to hear that bullshit. Apply pressure to these people, get the job done. Make sure this shit gets back to where it needs to be, where women's rights are protected for women, because there is no reason at all that the government can make that decision to tell women what to do. It should be up to women to make that decision. None of us should make that decision. And let's get some gun reform too while we're at it. So that's all I gotta say. So for me and Nick, I gotta get off before I continue my rant. So for me and Nick, everyone have a good one, and we'll talk to you all very soon.